In the Grand Canyon, not everything that has been found is understood. Over the years, objects, structures, and locations were discovered in places that raise questions. They appear in different sections of the canyon, in different decades. Individually, they seem unrelated. Together, they suggest a pattern tied to specific elevations, repeated routes, and discoveries that were recorded but never connected. This is not about legend or speculation. It is about real findings and what happens when they are placed side by side. Are you ready? Turn off the lights, turn up the volume, and hold on to your pillow, because after this video, you will never look at these discoveries the same way again. Structures found where no one should have built. The first discovery does not come from rumor. It comes from archaeology. Across the Grand Canyon, researchers have documented ancient stone structures built directly into cliff walls, not near the river, not near water sources, not near areas suited for living. These structures were found high above the canyon floor, in locations that even today require technical climbing to reach. They are not decorative. They are not ceremonial. They are granaries, storage rooms designed to protect food for long periods of time. That fact alone creates a problem. Food storage requires access, regular visits, maintenance. So why place essential supplies in locations that are dangerous, exhausting, and extremely difficult to reach? The construction details deepen the mystery. The openings face away from dominant winds. The walls are reinforced to reduce moisture damage. Some are positioned to avoid direct sunlight, slowing spoilage. These were not emergency caches. They were carefully engineered. Evidence suggests they were used repeatedly, not abandoned after construction, which means the people who built them knew exactly how to reach them safely, and they did it more than once. When archaeologists mapped these cliff granaries, another detail emerged. They are not isolated. Similar structures appear in different sections of the Grand Canyon, separated by miles of difficult terrain. Yet they follow the same logic: high placement, concealment, protection through effort. This implies shared knowledge, routes remembered, techniques passed down, a deep understanding of the canyon's vertical landscape. These builders were not just surviving here, they were organizing space, using difficulty as security, using elevation as protection. Individually, each structure can be explained. Together, they suggest deliberate planning. And this raises a larger question. If people were moving vertically through the canyon with this level of confidence, what paths were they using? And how were those paths remembered? That question leads directly to the next discovery. Symbols that appear where decisions are made. If people were moving through the Grand Canyon with precision, they needed ways to remember routes, not with maps, not with written language, but with symbols. Across different sections of the canyon, researchers documented repeated markings carved and painted into rock surfaces. They are not elaborate, they are simple, geometric, and they appear in very specific places, not near living areas, not near water, not where someone would stop for long. They appear where movement slows, narrow passages, natural ramps, transitions between canyon levels, places where a wrong turn can cost hours or lead to danger. The placement matters. These symbols are often positioned to face the route itself, not outward toward open views. They are meant to be seen by someone already moving through the canyon. This changes how they are understood. They are not decoration. They are not storytelling. They function as information, markers that indicate this route matters. This transition is used. Another detail stands out. The same types of symbols appear in locations separated by miles of difficult terrain. They are not local variations. They are consistent. That consistency suggests shared understanding across distance, a visual language. Archaeological records usually document these markings individually. Rarely are they compared as part of a system, but when mapped together, they align with concealed routes, paths that avoid exposure, paths that require prior knowledge. This explains why the symbols are simple. Complex images take time to read. Simple marks can be recognized instantly. In extreme terrain, speed and certainty matter. If someone was carrying supplies or moving through dangerous sections, they would not stop to interpret art. They would need confirmation. You are on the right path. Seen this way, these symbols stop being mysterious art. They become navigation. And if navigation existed, it implies something else. Repeated travel, familiar routes, and people who returned again and again, which leads to the next question. If these routes were used repeatedly, where did people stop when they could not continue? That is where the third discovery appears. Places used without any reason to stay. If movement through the canyon was planned, it required stopping points, but not every stop makes sense. Archaeological surveys in the Grand Canyon identified locations that show repeated human use, even though they offer no obvious reason for settlement, no nearby water, no natural shelter from heat, no resources worth harvesting, yet these sites were used. Evidence appears in short bursts, fire remnants, stone tool fragments, temporary structures that were never meant to last. These were not villages. They were not homes. They were used briefly, then abandoned, then used again. The pattern is consistent. The locations provide the explanation. These sites sit along difficult routes, often between canyon levels. They are positioned near natural ramps, ledges, or narrow corridors that allow movement without exposure. In a landscape like this, exposure is dangerous. Heat, wind, visibility. Hidden routes reduce all three. These locations functioned as waypoints, places to rest briefly, to reorganize supplies, to wait for safer conditions. Waiting matters in the Grand Canyon. Some of these zones overlook narrow passages below. From above, movement can be observed without being seen. This is not speculation about conflict. It is basic terrain logic. High ground sees movement. Hidden ground avoids attention. Individually, these sites appear confusing. There is no reason to live there. Together, they make sense. They form a chain, a network of temporary use sites supporting repeated movement through extreme terrain, which means the canyon was not just crossed. It was navigated, and navigation leaves patterns. Those patterns become harder to ignore when the next discovery is considered, because some areas connected to these routes were eventually closed, quietly. Discoveries followed by quiet closures. As research in the Grand Canyon expanded, some discoveries led to a different outcome: restriction. Over the decades, certain areas of the canyon were closed to public access. Most closures are expected: environmental protection, safety concerns. But some followed specific fines: archaeological sites, human-made structures, locations considered sensitive. In these cases, public explanations were brief: preservation, protection, limited access. What stands out is not the closure itself. It is the silence that followed. Detailed reports were rarely released. Follow-up studies were limited. Public discussion stopped. These areas did not disappear. They were preserved, but they were also removed from casual observation and comparison. This matters. When sites are isolated, patterns become harder to see. Independent researchers cannot easily compare locations. New technology is not applied regularly. Fresh perspectives are delayed. Over time, this creates gaps. Not because information is hidden, but because it is contained. Several restricted zones align geographically with the same kinds of features seen before: difficult access, vertical terrain, proximity to hidden routes. These closures did not erase discoveries. They froze them in place. Each site became a separate file, disconnected from others, which means the canyon's story continued to be told in fragments, and fragments rarely reveal systems. That becomes especially important when modern technology enters the picture, because even today, some parts of the canyon remain barely explored. The modern blind spots. By the late 20th century, the Grand Canyon entered the modern era. Satellite imagery, aerial photography, detailed mapping. On paper, the canyon was fully documented. In reality, it was not. Modern surveys favor what is accessible: trails, plateaus, river corridors. But the most difficult areas remain largely untouched: vertical walls, cliff bands, narrow shelves suspended above open space. These zones are dangerous to access. They require specialized teams. They demand time, funding, and risk management. As a result, modern exploration often stops where difficulty begins. This creates blind spots. Some discoveries are identified from a distance: a structure seen from below, a marking spotted from across a gorge. They are recorded, catalogued, then left without deeper study, not because of secrecy, because of logistics. Risk assessments limit follow-up. Budgets restrict extended access. Safety protocols slow exploration. This leads to a quiet outcome: Information exists but remains fragmented. Data points without synthesis. When discoveries remain isolated, patterns stay invisible. And in a place as vast as the Grand Canyon, what is not connected might as well not exist. This creates a false sense of completion. The canyon appears fully known, fully mapped, but critical spaces remain unexplored, especially the same kinds of locations where earlier discoveries were found. Which leads to the final question. If these discoveries share geography and modern exploration avoids those zones, what happens when everything is finally placed together? That question brings us to the last mystery. When everything is placed together. Individually, none of these discoveries are impossible to explain. A cliff granary can be labeled as engineering. A symbol can be classified as cultural expression. A temporary occupation site can be treated as a simple stop. That is how they are usually handled. As separate cases, separate reports, separate explanations. But something changes when all of them are placed side by side. When the locations of these discoveries are mapped together, they do not spread evenly across the Grand Canyon. They concentrate along specific elevation bands, near natural transitions between canyon levels, along routes that are difficult but not impossible to navigate. These are not random locations. They are places where movement is possible without full exposure to the canyon's extremes. This matters. The cliff granaries appear near routes that allow vertical travel. The repeated symbols appear where decisions must be made. The temporary occupation zones appear where movement must pause. Each discovery supports the next. Storage protects resources. Symbols guide movement. Waypoints support travel. Together they resemble a system. Not a system designed by one group at one time, but a system reused, adapted, and remembered over generations. This does not require hidden history. It requires continuity, knowledge passed down, routes reused, terrain mastered. The Grand Canyon is often described as hostile, and it is. But hostility forces organization. If people moved through this landscape repeatedly, they would not rely on chance. They would rely on structure. What makes this pattern unsettling is not what it claims. It is what it avoids claiming. No single origin, no single explanation, no single timeline. Just repeated logic appearing in the same kinds of places again and again. The discoveries exist. The records exist. What is missing is a comprehensive effort to treat them as parts of one landscape system. Until that happens, each finding remains manageable. But together, they suggest the Grand Canyon was not just a place people entered. It was a place they knew. And knowledge, when spread across distance and time, always leaves a pattern. When these discoveries are viewed separate, they feel ordinary, manageable, explainable. But when viewed together, they stop being coincidences. They become geography, movement, logic repeated over time. The Grand Canyon does not present answers easily. It presents fragments, and fragments only make sense when someone is willing to connect them. This video did not try to solve the mystery. It showed the pattern. If you found this investigation valuable, leave a like. It helps keep this kind of work visible when the questions matter more than easy answers.